Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means Friday Reads. This is a BookTube tradition that I love. I don't always participate in it, but I love to watch these videos where people pause for a minute in their headlong days and careers and even booktubing and talk about what they've read recently, what's on their docket right now, what's coming up in the future. Kind of a moment to pause and take a deep reading breath. I love Friday Reads for that. And I have a Friday Reads for you today myself. Ordinarily, I bellyache about how I can't really do it because I'm so special. But instead, I decided to just line up a Friday Reads of stuff that's on my docket. Just like everybody else does. That's easy enough to do. So I have a few books that I want to show you, and we'll start with one. There are a couple on here that I have read that I'll be reading again. And the first one of those is Timothy Snyder's book, Bloodlands, which is being reissued by the publisher because it's all about Ukraine during World War II. It's all about the killing fields of Europe. And it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to use the reissue as an opportunity to read it again. I cannot recommend it strongly enough. This author, just find whatever he writes. But his two big books on World War II, you absolutely should not miss. This is new, fresh thinking about a very, very well-known subject. So I'm very happy that they're reissuing it. Okay, this next one is a romance novel the latest in a long series. This is by J.R. Ward, and it's the latest in her Black Dagger Brotherhood series. I just recently was out and about and came across a little free library, the ones that we've been mentioning recently on BookTube, and there were a couple of Black Dagger Brotherhood novels in there, just big fat paperbacks, in perfect condition. And I forget which ones they were, Lover Avenged and Lover something or other. They're all that in the title. But I grabbed them both, and that put sort of the Black Dagger Brotherhood back on my mind. And then there's a new book that I'm going to read, of course, because I'm invested. I've read this whole series. This is Lover Arisen. There's always a sword on the cover, almost. There's always a man on the cover. The Black Dagger Brotherhood is an elite unit of vampire warriors. And over the years, I've got, how many of these have there been? 30? J.R. Ward has worked out, rudimentary world building, whole alternate vocabulary, all kinds of concepts. The Black Dagger Brotherhood has an extremely fervent fan base. I guess I'm not extremely fervent, but I guess I'm in that fan base. I keep coming back to this series. So, I mean, if there's a new one, I don't think you would want to start this series with the latest hardcover. I really don't. Although in some of the novels, in some of the Black Dagger Brotherhood novels, the setting, that huge complicated tapestry of backdrop doesn't seem to matter. Some of them favor much more strongly their current plot than they do broadening the world that connects all of these books. Maybe this will be one of those. Even so, I would still recommend finding a much earlier book in the series. Then we have a big work of history. I think we've seen this on this channel before. This is by Lloyd Llewellyn Jones, and this is a new history of the Persians, the ancient Persians, the age of the great kings. So here we'll have not only the great king who had the misfortune to go up against Alexander the Great, but also probably winding the story all the way down to the great kings that bedeviled, occasionally fought, and sometimes were bought off by the Roman Republic in the time of Julius Caesar. I don't know much about this book other than that it looks to be big and sweeping, so I'm hoping that it will consult a huge number of sources. That would be great. But a big new popular history on the great ancient Persian kingdom, I'm happy to read anyway, no matter how well researched it is. Okay, this next one we have seen on this channel. I have put off reading it, but it is more than time for me to read it. It's the month when it comes out. This is edited by Julian Zelizer, and it is The Presidency of Donald Trump, the First Historical Assessment. I took a look at this. We got this in the mail, and I took a look at it. I knew I wasn't going to read it right away because this is an extremely angering subject for me, and I try to be very careful about that. But I took a look at it, and honestly, the first feeling that I had about it, at first, when I opened it and when we talked about it on camera, I gave you my first response, which is that I think there's a strong argument to be made that there isn't any historical assessment of the presidency of Donald Trump other than January 6, 2020. That's it. That's all you have to think about, is that he orchestrated at a far greater and more detailed level than we knew, an armed insurrection to overthrow the government of the United States, execute his sitting vice president, and install himself in power illegally, probably for life. I can't think of a reason why not. You think he'd voluntarily leave? I think once a president of the United States does that, there isn't any point in assessing the rest of their presidency, even as a record for history, for the historical, archives. That's the only important thing about the Trump presidency, is that he tried to overthrow the government and install himself as a dictator. There's no reason to talk about tariffs or what he did or didn't do in Yemen. There's no reason to talk about that. But these authors clearly disagree, and that was my first reaction when I got the book in the mail. But when I went back to it and sort of looked at it a bit, I had a worse reaction, a suspicion now that I am operating under, and reading the book will either confirm it or dispel it, that this is meant to whitewash that this is meant very consciously in a partisan way to situate Donald Trump as a president in a line of presidents rather than the president who tried to overthrow the government and install himself as a dictator. In other words, not a president. Someone who wanted to be something else, who wanted to be something other than president of the United States, who, in other words, have broken the line. It's okay. I understand the urge from historians. I understand you want to study this thing. You don't want to study just that one day. Okay, that's fine. But why do you want to do that? And I got, when I was looking at this a little, I got almost the impression that this is a partisan effort to normalize Trump. Which means that when I get to it, I'll probably read it this weekend, and when I get to it, unfortunately, I hate to do this, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to do a deep dive of research into the contributors to this thing. First, I will do that, because that will determine what I do with the deep dive into the book, into its claims. Naturally, I will do that. If this is a partisan effort, the one thing that Trump partisans do, like breathing, is lie. Same thing as the guy they worship. In order to do that, they will have to smuggle in lies about Trump's record, about his actual presidency. And I'll encounter those right away. I've grown pretty skilled at detecting lies about this figure. But before I can even get to that, I will now have to examine the contributors. If I go into their social media, will I find it scrubbed? Will I find it gone? Or will I find it full of Make America Great Again hats? We'll see. We'll see. And, I'm not saying that someone who voted for Donald Trump can't assess Donald Trump objectively, but I'm close to saying that. So I don't know. It's going to be an unpleasant reading experience. I'll do it so that you don't have to, but it's going to be unpleasant. The next one will be very pleasant, and it also is, like Bloodlands, is a book that I've read. Not this particular volume, but the contents of it I have read many, many times. This is the next in the Saga Press reprints of Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock. Here we have a great cover. They're choosing a nice selection of great covers, iconic covers for this character. This is volume 2. I praised volume 1 over and over again on this channel. Now there's going, in April, I think this comes out, there's a second volume, and I will take any opportunity to reread these novels. I don't care what. A beautiful, new, cleaned up reprint series is, of course, the best opportunity, but I'll take any. Look at that Michael Whelan cover. Isn't that amazing? But anyway, then we'll move on. This next one is by Brandon McGill, who has written a couple of books, I think, on this subject. It's a subject near and dear to my heart, and near and dear to my head as well. It's The Story of Your Dog, a straightforward guide to a complicated animal. And you all know, I have said on this channel for years, there is only one two-legged creature anywhere on Earth who is actually qualified to write a book like this, and I haven't done it. Brandon McGill is probably a dog trainer. I haven't looked him up. He's probably got clients and whatnot. And I will read this because if it were only a dog training book, I probably wouldn't bother. No matter how popular it gets, I probably wouldn't bother. I have read some purely dog training books, The Monks of New Skeet, of course, How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend, or Barbara Woodhouse, the great Barbara Woodhouse, No Bad Dogs. But If this were purely a training manual, I probably wouldn't prioritize it for the weekend or the upcoming week. But it sounds from the subtitle like this is going to be more a discussion of domestic dogs as a way for Brandon McGill to try to make them comprehensible to the humans in their lives. I have done that many, many times, or tried to. Occasionally it works. It usually requires a fairly hefty conceptual shifting on the part of humans. The dogs are already doing everything right. but humans, I've found, most humans, even if they love their dogs, consider them to be toys, articles of amusement, that sort of thing. Not people. Not three-dimensional people. I've known even caring, loving owners who act towards their dogs with a bizarre lack of empathy in some ways that just jump out at me. So I don't know if Brandon McMillan thinks the same way. I have no idea. We shall see. We shall see. This is a dog book that I will read. There are a couple coming this year. If it turns out to be too heavy on the instruction, I'll probably DNF it. I'm going full Friday reads here. Then this next one is it's a pretty sure bet. This is the second book by John Gwynne. This is The Hunger of the Gods. Look at that cover. And the cover artwork extends to the back jacket, too, with the rest of that animal, that gigantic wolf. And some of you know your mythology will recognize a wolf wrapped in chains can only be one thing. John Gwynne's fantasy story, this started off with the Blood of the Gods or something like that. This is set in a sprawling fantasy world that's very much inspired by Norse mythology. As I think you'd know right away if you look at this cover and you know Norse mythology, you'll think the Fenris wolf. I don't remember the exact name of the first book, but I loved it. I'd never met anybody who's read it who didn't love it, and have been eagerly awaiting the second book. So I mean, it's a big thing, but it's a no-brainer, and a strong likelihood that I will enjoy it. Just a strong likelihood. Then we'll go to back to World War II history, but unlike the Timothy Snyder, this thing I haven't read. This is Victory at Sea, Naval Power and the Transformation of the Global Order in World War II, and it's by Paul Kennedy. And apparently it's a history of American naval operations during World War II in one volume, but also an assessment of what that did, of America's proficiency and also sheer amount of tonnage at sea during World War II went up like that. It didn't increase steadily. It went up like that. And it stayed that way. And I think this book looks more at that. What are the long-term effects of that? What does that mean for a shifting of global power? Because at the time, that was a huge component. I'm always up for it, especially if Paul Kennedy has maybe some new or challenging things to say. Perfectly happy to see if he can convince me. Then this next one, he's a controversial author. I have tended to like his books, but he has a tendency to easy thinking, and he doesn't think that. He thinks that he is one of the greatest thinkers in the world, and that is always dangerous. The author is Douglas Murray. Some of you will know him for The Madness of Crowds, and he has a new book coming out called The War on the West. He has been objecting for 10 years now to the current line of discussion on the alt-left side of the spectrum, the SJW alt-left side of the spectrum, that says that the Western world, the West with a capital W, is a sinkhole of evil and villainy and slavery and corruption and exploitation and genocide and nothing else. The alt-left side of the spectrum says that there's nothing good about that version of the West, that the West has never done anything good, is not worthwhile, is not worth preserving. And that, of course, is an extreme view. Most people don't hold that view, and Douglas Murray knows that, but he's going after it anyway. He's going after it again in this book. I find him a smoothly readable author, so I won't have a problem with the book. It's just, if it's like his last book, which was a huge bestseller, then I worry that I'm going to be reading the book and getting the impression that he's thinking that he's Schopenhauer when he's not. He's not. He's putting a barely acceptable parlor face on some very unsavory people from the alt-right. And he's not doing much more than that. Otherwise, if he were engaged in the kind of incredibly serious, hard, world-changing thinking that he always thinks he's on, you wouldn't need strawmen. Strawmen are a sign. They're a warning sign. So we shall see. It could be that that he has some interesting things to say here. He'll do endless press for the book, so I pretty much feel like I have to read it. And then we'll finish up here with a murder mystery. I've praised this series before. These are by C.S. Harris, and this is When Blood Lies. This is a Sebastian St. Cyr murder mystery, historical murder mysteries, very good on atmosphere, and the main character, Sebastian St. Cyr, is fascinating. He's like Harry Dresden in the Dresden Files. You want to read his adventures. There are good plots. The plots are well done in these novels. The historic atmosphere and the events from history are well done. But the main thing that keeps you coming back is the main character, even more than the supporting cast. So I haven't missed a book in this series in years. So I'm very happy that a new one is coming out this month. And there you go. See, that was a normal, everyday Friday reads. A bunch of books that I either haven't read or am rereading because they're getting new editions. These are on my docket for the month of April. They are on my docket relatively immediately. I've got a couple of things to read this afternoon, but then I'll start on these tonight. I'll probably start with the Trump book just to get it over with. But anyway, that's my Friday reads for today. I'd love to know, as usual with Friday reads, what you're working on for the weekend, and I'll be watching all the Friday reads videos that I can find to find out what my fellow booktubers are doing. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.